All right, I see the numbers are slowing a little bit. I'm going to jump into some of our logistics and introductions because I want to make sure we maximize our time with our speaker. So good afternoon again and welcome everybody to our webinar. Thank you for taking the time to join us. Before we get started, let me introduce myself. I'm Dr. Christine Moody. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist and the Tarjan Center lead on several post-secondary education and employment initiatives. The UCLA Tarjan Center, as many of you know, is a federally designated center for excellence in developmental disabilities, and we are your host for today's webinar. Support for this webinar comes from a contract with the California Community College Chancellor's Office to provide training and technical assistance to the community college system, DSPS offices, and the college to career programs to support equitable access, services, and opportunities for students with developmental disabilities. Before we transition to the talk, I have a few logistical items to go over. So we'll be recording this webinar. It will be available for viewing on our website. We'll send out an email to all that have registered probably within the next week. Throughout the webinar, all participants will remain muted. However, we invite you to put questions in the Q&A feature on Zoom. That should be on the toolbar if you go down to the bottom. We will try to get to as many questions as we can at the end of the presentation. For those of you that would like captioning, there is a captioning link in the chat. So there should be a link, stream text link, if you'd like to use the captions. All right, so I'm going to introduce our speaker in our webinar today. So today's webinar is on new legislation that creates an alternate pathway to a high school diploma for students with significant cognitive disabilities or intellectual disability. And this work really comes out of the belief that every student with a disability should have the opportunity to earn a high school diploma that allows them to pursue college and employment. And today we'll be talking more about what that pathway will look like, explore the implications not only for the students and families, but also for the K-12 and community college systems that serve them. This webinar will be presented by Sue Sawyer, president of the California Transition Alliance, who is part of the work group that made recommendations related to this legislation. Sue Sawyer's career in education includes roles as a teacher, reading specialist, career guidance counselor, administrator, and university adjunct faculty member. She has a master's degree in school counseling and is currently the president of the statewide nonprofit organization, California Transition Alliance, which provides training and resources to help youth and youth-serving professionals through the transition to adulthood from high school to post-secondary opportunities. Thank you for being here, Sue, and for sharing all of your knowledge with us. And without further ado, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Christine. I am excited to be here today. This is a topic that I'm pretty passionate about. And I want to clarify that in 2013, the California Transition Alliance formed a work group to start really looking at why students with IEPs were not earning high school diplomas. And in 2013, that number was 65% of students with IEPs, including all disabilities, were not earning a diploma. So we asked the question, why? And some of the information that we shared became part of the report that we will reference during this presentation. So I'm pleased to let you know that the numbers of students with IEPs who earn diplomas now has reached 78%. So there's been improvement, but we're not where we want to be yet. Next slide. I hope today that we can explore the value of the diploma for the student. We analyze new and emerging expectations and outcomes. We identify diploma requirements for all youth and explore the impact of changes in the community college. This presentation is based on federal and state legislation, the Alternative Pathway to a Diploma Work Group report, California Education Code research, and resources at the California Department of Education. Next slide. So why is the diploma so important for all of our students? Next slide. Well, let's take a look at how we're doing. The graduation rate for all high school students in the 4th and 5th year cohort in the state of California is 87.4%. And last year, students with disabilities earned the high school diploma at the rate of 75.2%. Another frightening piece of data is the dropout rate for students with disabilities is 14%. And on a national level, the employment rates for youth with disabilities is 29%, and contrast that with youth without disabilities being at 47%. For students or for young adults ages 20 to 24, youth with disabilities are employed at the rate of 50%, and their peers without disabilities are at 72%. And let's take a look at the post-secondary education enrollment. The college-going rates for all students is 63%. College rate for students with disabilities is 41%. Of the 63% of all students who go to college, 53% start at the community college and 31% start at the universities. For students with disabilities, 81% start at the community college. So the community colleges play a significant role in transition for students with disabilities. It provides them that avenue to get involved with college. It provides the training for career technical education pathways and for transfer degrees. Only 10% of the students, and these are the students who leave high school and go directly to the college system. Only 10% of the students with disabilities go to the UC system or the university systems right out of high school. Next slide. So what happens to you on a personal level when you lack a diploma? Well, it can impact your confidence and your sense of optimism. You experience doubts. You begin to not believe in yourself. You lack the minimum qualifications for jobs and face employer bias. You don't qualify for some types of financial aid for post-secondary education. You don't meet minimum qualifications for post-secondary education and training. And you question why you should stay in school if you can't earn a diploma like most of your peers. So not having the diploma is a barrier to achieving successful outcomes. And it also endangers our students to end up in jobs that are in danger because of artificial intelligence and automation. Next slide. This graphic shows that quadrant of jobs that are the lowest paid and most vulnerable to automation and to artificial intelligence. And you can see that many of the jobs that our students access while they're in school are directly those kinds of jobs that are the most vulnerable and are paid the least, so it's a life of poverty. Next slide. The lack of a diploma is a barrier to employment and post-secondary education. I think of the diploma as a ticket. It meets the job requirements. When I fill out an online application for a job, if the application says, do you have a high school diploma, and you answer the word no, you're kicked off that system. You don't get to finish the application, let alone get to the interview. 90% of employers prefer to hire youth with a diploma. 30% of jobs are low skilled and susceptible to automation. 66% of jobs in the United States require a diploma and post-secondary education and training. The other challenge is that it's a ticket to college and university. I know that the community college does not require the high school diploma, but many other programs do. And FAFSA eligibility requires a high school diploma or a GED type diploma, unless you are a student with a significant intellectual disability and qualify for a comprehensive transition and post-secondary program. And that is the only exception to the high school diploma and post-secondary financial support. Next slide. This is a list of the colleges that are in the state of California that offer college programs designed for students with intellectual and developmental disabilities. We have the college to career programs, and we have other college and university programs that are not necessarily college and career programs, college to career programs. CTP stands for the program where financial aid, federal financial aid is available, and the TIPSID are transition and post-secondary programs for students with intellectual disabilities, and they are federally funded types of programs. And there is current legislation that is being proposed in the next session, AB 447, to expand the numbers of university programs in the state of California. So let's hope it passes. Next slide. So how did we get into this situation where so many kids don't have the diploma? Our research indicated that by the third grade, students are put on an academic path or on a functional skills path. And the decider is reading scores. And sometimes it's even younger, depending on the label. So if you're on an academic path, you leave school from the elementary school prepared for the middle school, high school, post-secondary education and training. But if you're in the third grade and you're put on that functional skills path, you are taken out of that academic rigor. And as a result, you're following far behind in middle school, even farther behind in high school, and then you struggle with post-secondary education and training. And parents are faced with a choice relevant to the academic curriculum by the third grade. And that decision made in the third grade impacts whether or not students earn a diploma. And low expectations impact the students for their entire lives. Students who lack an academic foundation lack the skills required to earn a diploma and struggle to be prepared for post-secondary education and work. And here's a little food for thought. Did this student have the opportunity to learn academic standards? Should they be denied a diploma because we had low expectations early in their education? And that is one of the issues that schools are struggling with today. Next slide. This report by the Hechinger report, almost all students with disabilities are capable of graduating. Here's why they are not, came out in 2017. And it talked about the fact that students with, the question it answers is, I think this has a fly in. If 85 to 90% of students with IEPs have average intelligence or higher, why are only 65% earning a standard diploma nationwide? Are all students granted the opportunity to learn academic standards, and are all teachers adequately trained in the elements of universal design? Next slide. We want all of our students to leave school prepared for employment, and that's becoming more critical for the students with intellectual and developmental disabilities. The closure of the sheltered workshops and the focus on competitive integrated employment means that we need to start preparing these students at a much younger age. And in all the work that I have done with counseling and guidance for students in different populations and educational settings, there are three things that rang true for me. The student who had a sense of hope and optimism about their future could set a plan and achieve that plan. The student had to have confidence in themselves, and they had to have trust they had adequate resources to achieve their goals. If any one of those variables are lacking, why would I make a plan for myself? Why would I set myself up for failure? So if I don't believe there's a world out there for me, if I lack confidence in myself, and if I have hope and confidence, but I know I don't have the financial resources or the transportation or the support system I need to be able to achieve my goals, why would I bother to set a plan for my future? Next slide. So let's reflect on our progress. Schools are going through a tsunami of change, and so are the adult services. The K-12 system, we are beginning to recognize that preparation for transition begins in early childhood. We are focusing on helping parents understand how important it is that they help their children learn about their interests and set goals and look at assets. We're moving towards person-centered and student-centered planning, asset-driven IEPs, diplomas for all instead of a few. Reading by the 3rd grade is a goal that the superintendent has set. Early college and dual enrollment and the value of career technical education are all themes to recent legislative goals. The community college system is moving away from remedial classes with AB 1705, focus on transfer degrees and career tech pathways, and the community college system provides accommodations, not lowering the standards. And they're looking at multi-measures of readiness, just one test score. Next slide. So there's a huge difference between high school and college. In high school, you know your classmates. In college, there's more diversity. Your parents and teachers made sure you were in school every day. In high school, you're on your own. In college, you have to manage your own time. Tests and quizzes were given regularly in high school. College instructors give fewer tests. Parents and teachers offer a lot of guidance. Nobody treats you like a kid anymore in college. Reading assignments were short. You have to do more reading in college. Good grades were easy to get if you paid attention in class. Good grades require a lot more effort. They're a lot harder to get. They require a lot of study. Classes were small with a lot of instructor-student interaction, and classes are larger, more complex, and more impersonal at the college level. So when should we start helping students develop the skill sets they need for college? I argue that we need to start talking about transition in early childhood. Maybe we need to start moving students towards greater autonomy and more independence while they're in high school or even middle school. Next slide. So here are some points for you to reflect on as we go through this, and hopefully we'll have a question and answer time at the end. When should students with intellectual disabilities be encouraged to think about college? When or how should parents be engaged in conversations? How do college readiness standards be equivalent to life skills? What are the biggest challenges your students face? Next slide. The next few slides are going to explore the K-12 system. And we're going to explore how all students earn a diploma and then how that system informed the development of the alternative pathway to the diploma. So let's explore the K-12 system. There are 4 ways you earn a diploma. You earn a local diploma, meeting local education requirements, local education agency requirements. California is a local control state, so every school can have their criteria for their graduation requirements. So there's, the other thing is that you can earn that diploma with waivers and accommodations, or there is another set of classes, and we'll explain this in more detail. You can earn a high school diploma using state requirements, or you participate in the alternative pathway for students with significant cognitive disabilities using Ed Code language related to alternative means for earning a diploma. So let's explore these in a little bit more context. Next slide. The federal definition of a high school diploma is awarded to the preponderance of students in the state, fully aligned with state standards, or a higher diploma is not aligned to the alternative academic achievement standards, does not include a GED, a certificate of completion, certificate of attendance, or similar less credential, such as a diploma based on meeting IEP goals. The vast majority of students with disabilities should have access to the same high quality academic coursework as all other students in the state. This is the framework that we had to use to take a look at the whole picture of the diploma. Next slide. So it's unequivocal. The certificate of completion is not a diploma. There are no student performance expectations related to the diploma or certificate. It has little or no value in post-school environments. The certificate of completion, one of the criteria for earning it is I was in school up until age 22. So it really is meaningless in that next environment. And it was the recommendation of the work group that becomes a local control issue. If there are students that need it, that's the school's call. But we strongly recommend that lots more students who have traditionally earned the certificate of completion could earn the diploma. Next slide. So this is the way it works. In the state of California, we have the state minimum numbers of courses you are required to complete to earn a diploma. Career technical ed pathways are another path to the diploma with a strong emphasis in career technical education. And then we have A to G courses. And a lot of the local education agencies have said, we want all of our students to leave school prepared for the university. Therefore, we're only going to use the A to G courses, and only students who complete A to G courses qualify. So that's a challenge for any challenged learner. And there can be local graduation requirements. So a school can say, all of our students are required to take community service. Or a different LEA can say, all of our students are required to do a senior project, or come up with something that's in addition to the coursework. And as you can see, the state requires 3 years of English, A to G requires 4 years, math, 2 years at the state level, 3 years A to G, science, 2 years all the way. Social science, more actually at the state than the A to G. Visual and performing arts, A to G requires at least 1 year of visual and performing arts. It requires 2 years of foreign language in the same language, or you could use a career tech ed class. The classes that are the state classes say these are classified as electives and you can choose one of them. And the state requires 2 years of PE, and then it requires no PE for A to G courses. However, you have to meet the state requirements. That's the baseline. That's the minimal expectation for classes you are required to take. As we did the research to figure out why so many students were not receiving a diploma, we found out that there are lots of exceptions to the rule. One of them is the LEA can waive local graduation requirements and issue a diploma based on state course requirements. And that language in that ed code started with foster youth, members of military families, homeless youth, English language learners, people with a high degree of mobility. So you can't start high school and meet those criteria if you start at your sophomore year. The other thing that was the exception in ed code is that there are alternative means for students to earn the diploma. And that is typically provided to students in alternative education. And so you've got a system where some students are exempt from those local graduation requirements. Some schools can use alternative means. What we recommended is, why not add students with disabilities in that category of waiving the local graduation requirements? We have been advised by the state that the IEP team can make that decision and that it needs to be board approved, and they can be added to the list of waivers. And the structure for that, where I would go to find out what the policy should be, is looking at their structure, their policy for foster youth. Next slide. This slide just shows the difference in the levels of coursework that are required between the two systems. And for the career technical ed pathways, a lot of them adopted the state minimum course requirements, but a lot of them also aligned with A to G course requirements and had their programs listed as a state course A to G. So, but you can see there's a significant difference in the depth and understanding and what kinds of classes are required. Next slide. So the work group recommended that we that we utilize the existing diploma pathways, and that for the students who do not have significant cognitive disabilities and who are eligible to stay in school till they're 22, we said, you know, they need a brand new pathway. But for the other students who may have a challenge earning the diploma based on local graduation standards, we recommended using that pathway and adding that group of students to the list of those students. Make sense? I hope I'm not confusing you. Next slide. So there are some implications here. There's a difference in the definitions of significant cognitive disabilities between the K-12 system, the regional centers, the community college, and the Department of Rehabilitation. Students who are IDD traditionally earned a certificate of completion. Now there are multiple paths to a diploma. It is the recommendation of the work group report that all diplomas look the same. We don't want an alternative lesser than stamp on the diploma, and we want them to be able to say, yes, I have a standard high school diploma. And so we agree that you can meet the local requirements for a diploma, you can participate in a career technical pathway, you can earn a diploma based on state coursework requirements with board approval, and you can participate in the alternative pathway for students with significant cognitive disabilities. Next slide. So where do you find out whether or not a student qualifies? Well, the high school diploma is not what qualifies you for post-secondary institutions. It's your transcript. So this chart just shows the difference between what a high school diploma tells you and what a transcript tells you. And the goal of the transcript is to inform post-secondary education institutions and prospective employers of a student's academic achievements. But the issue is that transcripts cannot specifically identify programs for students with disabilities. So you can put advanced placement, honors, remedial instruction, and but you cannot say this person has a disability, so they were in this alternative system. But you can put alternative pathway to a diploma, and that's what allows the system to help these students stay in school up to age 22, because you don't want them not to have that free and appropriate education as long as they need it. Next slide. So Every Student Succeeds Act says only students with the most significant cognitive disabilities should receive alternative diplomas, and only if they have taken the state's alternative assessments. And no more than 1% of students graduating in a state should receive the alternative diploma. What the state said was the alternative diploma pathway results in a diploma that is the alternative diploma in the context of this law, but it is a standard diploma. So it's a little bit confusing, and it's an issue we're dealing with. Next slide. The federal definition of an alternative diploma is that it's standards-based, aligned with state requirements for a regular high school diploma. It's obtained within the time period for which the state ensures the availability of free and appropriate public education, and shall not include any student awarded a GED, certificate of completion, certificate of attendance, or similar less credential. So when we say that the pathway prepares the students to earn the diploma, the pathway is standards-based. It aligns with the course requirements that the state sets. You can earn the diploma up to age 22. And people who earn a certificate are not getting a diploma. Okay, next slide. So this is what our law says. Before the student commences grade 10, the student IEP team must determine and notify the student's parent and guardian whether the student is eligible to graduate on a diploma. We recommend that goes to grade 8, but right now it's in grade 10. The pupil is required to take the alternative assessments in grade 11 and is required to complete state standards aligned coursework meeting the statewide minimum coursework requirements. And we need to develop plans to offer all students in the high school and adult transition programs the high school diploma that is compliant with IDEA and its focus on transition. Next slide. So there was a Supreme Court ruling in 2017, and the Supreme Court ruling basically said that a student offered an educational program providing merely more than de minimis, that's very minimum progress from year to year, can hardly be said to have offered an education at all. For students with disabilities, receiving instruction that aims so low it would be tantamount to sitting idly, waiting the time they were old enough to drop out. IDEA requires more. It requires an educational program reasonably calculated to help the child make progress appropriate in light of the child's circumstance. So you have to be ambitious, you have to have high expectations, and it's a general standard. So the Supreme Court has already said that de minimis is inadequate. And de minimis means just making a little progress, not a lot of progress. Next slide. So one of the things that we talk about a lot in inclusive practices are the fact that we want students involved in general ed courses and receiving support. And many students with IEPs need accommodations to pass inclusive classes. And these are the list of those kinds of accommodations. And I'm sure that many of these also are used in the college program. Alternative instruction, not so much maybe, but digital tools, accommodations, testing accommodations, breaks, and getting extra time, study skills training, sensory tools, outline and note-taking. And the effective use of accommodations requires the student understand their disability and how to accommodate themselves and how to ask for accommodations. One of the best places to find information about that is on the askjan.org website. It's a phenomenal website, and it was originally set up to provide employers information about low and no cost accommodations for workers with different types of disabilities. I like it because it describes the disability in layman's terminology, not technical terms, and it offers suggestions that could be used in the classroom as well as the workplace. Next slide. One of the things California has done really well is create this accessibility tool. And it talks about all of the different ways that there are universal tools that can be used for all students. And then what the difference is between those and accommodations and designated supports. And this is a real lengthy, updated document that's available on the California website. But one of the things that occurred to me as I was looking at this is how many of us really work with the students to help them understand how to accommodate themselves using accessibility features on their phones, on their tablets, on their computers, and what's that going to look like in the future? Next slide. So when we talk about accommodations and accessibility and modified curriculum, we're talking about universal design, we're talking about accommodations, we're talking about accessibility. In the K-12 system, we use the terms differentiated instruction, and multi-tiered systems of support. And we're talking about modified curriculum. Next slide. So a challenge for the K-12 system is, how do we identify those standards? And the first way is to use the standards and use universal design for learning and effective teaching methodologies that help that student grasp the concepts. The other thing that we talk about is consulting with general ed teachers and creating curriculum and collaboration and including the students with disabilities in general ed courses. We talk about using tools like the accessibility tools. And then there are some resources that are on the state website having to do with Common Core connector standards and career readiness standards, and adopting a standards-based curriculum from published resources. So there are ways to approach this. And next slide. This is an example from dynamic learning maps, where you can take that standard and you can take the common element that is core to that standard, and you can have achievement levels for different students. So you keep the standard as a high standard, and you modify expectations in terms of the way you assess, the kinds of support you give, and expectations. And this is just an example of how it could work. Next slide. So the lessons we have learned. National research has shown us that students with intellectual disabilities who have had a post-secondary education experience are 26 times more likely to be successfully employed upon completing vocational rehabilitation services and earn a 73% higher weekly wage than their peers without that post-secondary education experience. California's Department of Rehab responded to this compelling data by allocating funding for college to career programs. One of the things that amazed me, because I worked with Shasta College in the early stages of developing their programs, and these students were arriving on the campus without that foundation for academic skills. But the students who attended the programs are passing college courses, earning industry certificates, and going to work, and they have a high persistence rate. They're offered personal support, guidance in selecting classes, accommodations, and at the universities, they're offered intensive reading instruction. So maybe the problem has been our expectations, not their capability of learning. And maybe we need to rethink the way we deliver education for these students and our expectations for them. Next slide. So what are the implications for college and career readiness? It is anticipated as the K-12 system changes to engage students with IDD in standards-focused curriculum, starting in kindergarten, going through the 12th grade, they will arrive at the college with academic skills. However, this is a tall mountain to climb, and it's a systems change endeavor. They will continue to need accommodations and accessible resources. California is closing sheltered work environments, increasing the need to prepare students for competitive integrated employment. They will continue to benefit from engagement in career technical pathways. And one of our challenges is we have a low enrollment statistic for students with any disability, with any IEP, being enrolled in career technical pathways. Communication and seamless transition between systems is increasingly important. And all students benefit from transition services, including pre-employment transition services, so we can't lose sight of the value of the work-based learning and the career development components and all of that. Traditionally, students with IDD are expected to stay in school to age 22. However, the mandatory education ends at age 18. So at age 18, it becomes a parent and student choice to stay in school. As they earn diplomas earlier, they may choose to go on to their next destination. There's a growing emphasis on person-centered planning, and that goes across planning for college, planning the IEP, planning for work with the Department of Rehabilitation, and planning in DDS services. And their changes in employment expectations necessitate the needs for apprenticeships and internships and work-based learning and earning industry certificates. One of the things that LinkedIn does real well is create tools that people can go and use to earn industry certificates in real easy to use, easy to understand terminology. And so maybe we need to look external from education and help the students access those kinds of resources too. Next slide. How did we get here? How did we get to this place where we had such low expectations? Well, let's think about it for a minute. When we think about these students with intellectual disabilities, they started out in institutions, and then we brought them to the community, and then we put them in sheltered workshops. Now those are considered obsolete. We want them to live and independently. We want them to work and go to school. And so each element of transition led to greater inclusion in the community and improved our understanding of what skill sets they have. Now we talk independence at work and home and the community. And there is a case to be made for the value of competitive integrated employment. Full inclusion, best possible health, high quality of life, better wages. There are so many inspirational stories that become the rule and not the exception, that we need to embrace this, and we need to say that's our goal for the vast majority of these students. Next slide. Suggested next steps. We have, first of all, examine expectations and challenges for student groups, and that goes across the board. One of the things that I think is a challenge is our expectations were low. Well, with low expectations, we're kind of off the hook in teaching them, and they're off the hook in learning. So examining expectations and challenging students are really important. Provide training for all faculty in the areas of inclusion and universal design for learning. Collaborate with transition supports beyond high school. Community colleges and universities are destinations for increasing numbers of students with disabilities, and that is only going to be a trend that grows. Provide orientation and information to parents. The SELPAs have community advisory committees made up of parents, and it would be a good idea to get on their agenda and start talking to those parents, especially parents with younger children. Review eligibility for financial aid. There are some things that are happening for all the students in the system that we really want to include the students with disabilities. And one of them is dual enrollment classes or early college types of programs. Examine the application process to ensure access. Encourage schools to adopt thinkcollege.net college readiness goals. They're an awesome tool. And our students with disabilities encouraged to participate in those events that happen in the community that help them with college fairs, applying for financial aid, visiting the college campus. And when should this outreach begin is another question for further discussion. Next slide. Well, I am amazed, but we were able to finish in the time frame allowed, and we've got some time for questions and answers. So this is the site for the thinkcollege.net. And so are there any questions?
There are. Thank you so much, Sue, for that presentation. So much great information, and we're getting comments in the chat that, about people wanting to access the slides, and that it's been really helpful. So there are lots of questions. So several participants are asking about options for current high school students who maybe are past grade 10 or, are further along in their high school education, and whether this alternative pathway to the high school diploma will be available to them.
One of the reasons that I added that piece on the exceptions to the local graduation requirements are that we have students who may be in grade 12, and the last year that the alternative assessment is given is grade 11. And they plan to stay in school up to age 22. Should they be deprived of the opportunity of earning a diploma just because they didn't take that assessment? Or should between grades 12 and 22, we focus on helping them earn the diploma, and it would probably be based on the state coursework requirements. But even for those students that are in the alternative pathway, they're still going to have English and math and science and social science and electives and PE. So those are variables that are true no matter where. But I think that we need to be, if the goal of the local education agency is these students should earn a diploma, one of the exceptions to the rule is the waiving local requirements. That applies to those students as well. But right now, the law as written by the Department of Finance says they must take the alternative assessment, and we are looking to find out legally if we can change that to must be eligible to take the alternative assessment, because the law says this applies to students with exceptional needs, and they're required to take the alternative assessment. When you find out who is eligible for the alternative assessment, it's only students with significant cognitive disabilities.
And I'm wondering,
so that's kind of a glitch in the way the law is written and past practice. There are a lot of schools that didn't really push the alternative assessment, and now it's got an importance that it didn't used to have.
Yeah, and that brings me to another question, whether you could speak a little bit about what the California alternative assessment is.
The California alternative assessment, when Common Core standards came out, they wanted to have an alternative assessment system to be able to use with students with significant cognitive disabilities that was based on the state standards. And so it is standards driven. And it is an assessment that is in reading and math. There are other alternative standards that are also listed. And if you go to the website for California Alternative Assessments, it's got at California Department of Ed, it's got a lot of information about what is included in that alternative assessment.
Great, thank you. And then we also have a question about just clarifying. So with this new alternative pathway to the diploma for students with intellectual disability, they will be able to stay in school through 22 and continue to work on achieving those state standard requirements for that. So they'll have extended time to achieve that. Is that correct?
That is correct. The law says that if you earn a diploma, you graduate, you're no longer eligible for free and appropriate education. The exception to the law is the alternative pathway to the diploma. And it says you can earn the diploma, and it may take you up to age 22 to earn the diploma. And it may be that you earn the diploma at age 20, but you want to stay in school to get some transition opportunities. And it gives you that flexibility. And where that is specified is in the student's transcript. So it's really important that the transcript reflects alternative pathway to a diploma so that these students can get that free and appropriate education up to age 22.
Great. And in terms of financial aid, this alternative pathway to the diploma will open up doors to post-secondary financial aid, correct?
Yes, there are already some programs in the state of California that are technically categorized as CTP programs. They're comprehensive transition programs, and it enables them to provide federal financial aid. So that is in reference to federal financial aid.
However, if a student is not in a CTP, but they obtained the high school diploma through that alternate pathway, they would now be eligible for FAFSA like any other student, right?
I think they would, but I think that's going to be a decision that's made by the community college system.
Okay. Good to know. Let's see. We have a question about if you have any recommendations for community colleges about increasing the number of students with disabilities in career technical education pathways.
You know, it's been my experience, and this goes back quite a few years, but I ran the college to career programs, and we had an 8th grade college awareness day on the college campus. And we invited all the 8th grade students that were in the Tri-County area to come and participate in this event. And it was a career fair that was held on a college environment. And they actually took a bus. Shasta College is a large campus, so walking it was not feasible in a time frame. So we actually put them on a bus, and they had a guided tour of the campus. So they got to see the farm, they got to see the vineyards, they got to see the dorms, they got to see the athletic fields, and they got to see and they got to actually physically walk around, and they had interactive presentations, and career technical ed played a huge role in that endeavor. And we had kids tell us that they went to the college environment, they saw that program, and they wanted to enroll because they saw the program. So I think when you touch it and you feel it and you experience it, you want to give it a try. So that's one approach. Another approach would be to make sure that while they're in high school, you know, we are required to develop transition plans based on the students' interests and goals. And if their interests and goals are in a field that's covered with career technical ed, we need to really advocate for the students to participate and have that experience. But it is a challenge. I think only 22% of the students with IEPs participate in career technical education. And we need to do a better job of increasing that number, because it gives the kids, even my own son started out in the ROP fire training program, went to Shasta College, his fire academy, and is now a battalion chief for the City of Reading Fire Department. It sets them on a path, and I've got personal experience with that. And so it's just so awesome and such a tremendous value to the students. And if they don't think they can possibly get a degree, but they could get that certificate, they would be well served to have that certificate. The other thing that I think happens is when the students are involved in a dual enrollment class, they've got a grade that says I went to college, or I got a grade in this college course. What does that do for hope and confidence? So Absolutely. I think there's some things that could happen, and we hope it does.
Yeah, those vocational certificates that the community colleges offer can be so meaningful and valuable for employment and trajectory.
Mm-hmm. And you also have to realize that what you're doing is instilling hope and confidence. So if I can achieve this, maybe I could go for this, is what happens. And so I am a huge proponent of college or career technical education.
We have a couple of people asking about how the transcript will reflect the alternate pathway, or if there's, where it would be on the transcript, or how would college kind of know where to look?
Well, transcripts list the courses you take and the grades you earn in those courses. And the transcript can reflect if you took any remedial courses, and it can reflect any honors courses. And in that space where you've got what types of courses you took, you put alternative pathway to the diploma. And that's not, you've got your grades, and then you've got your other data. So it's kind of the same thing that you use when you look at a transcript for going to the university and you've got honors classes and all those things. Well, it would have this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so some kind of designation next to the class. Okay. Several people have asked me to triple confirm. So the having the alternative pathway does not preclude a student from continuing to access transition services through 22.
That is correct. But it's a student choice. I mean, the student can choose to stay in school or not. That's true now because mandatory education ends at age 18. They're offered the opportunity to continue in school, and sometimes parents like it, sometimes regional centers like it, sometimes the student likes it. But the goal can be you stay in school for a longer period of time so you can get that diploma. So the diploma kicks you out of the system. You have the legal right to stay in school beyond age 18. So,
but for you were saying before that there's an exception for this for students with on this alternate pathway that
the alternate pathway allows you to stay in school up to age 22.
Great. Let's see. Just looking through other questions here. For families who are interested in this alternate pathway for their child, who would be the people to talk to?
I think they can talk to their administrator, they can talk to their teacher. I mean, you begin with who you feel comfortable with, but at the IEP meeting, you need to go in there prepared to say, I don't want my student taken off the academic path. I want them to have the academic curriculum. And when functional skills curriculum is offered, you say, no, thank you. And I think you have to advocate for inclusive participation in general ed courses. Because we used to have these set aside courses where you got your instruction. Now we're saying a student is a general ed student who receives special ed services. And so we really need to focus on that general ed. And that requires working with the teacher and going on up the chain of command, if necessary, to advocate for your son or daughter.
Let's see. And then how does this affect students who are qualified for special education under autism, but not intellectual disability?
The same things are true. They would not qualify unless they have a dual diagnosis. They wouldn't qualify necessarily for IDD, but they definitely would qualify for an exception to the LEAs that require A to G classes in order to get your diploma. You can say no. So when we did the work group, it was, we've got these students, and there are 3 categories of students, and how do you meet the needs of all 3 categories? And one of the categories is that middle group that could be successful if they were allowed to take the state mandated courses and waive those local courses or local requirements for graduation.
So just to clarify,
that would be a way to accommodate them.
Yeah. So to clarify that I'm, understanding correctly that, so there's the standard pathway A through G plus local, and then the legislation created for any student with a disability to be able to waive the local and A through G and just have the state standard requirements. That's like the middle pathway you're describing. And then for students with significant cognitive disability, intellectual disability, they are able to take the California alternative assessment, maintain, stay in school through 22, and achieve the state, still meet all the state standard classes, but through that kind of additional time and support. Is that right?
Yes.
So for a student with autism, would they have to, would earning the diploma with just the state standards, then eliminate their ability to access transition services through 22?
Well, earning the diploma is what eliminates staying in school. So there are, and actually this is true of more than just students with disabilities. The state of California decided to base their graduation rate on students in the 4th and 5th year cohort, because there are a percentage of students who couldn't finish their diploma in 4 years. So they were given an extra year to complete the diploma. So this isn't a brand new idea only for students with disabilities. This is applying what's available to other groups of students to students with disabilities. But it does require the IEP team makes the recommendation, and it does require that board policy is in place to allow that to happen.
Okay. Well, I'm noticing time. We already went a few minutes over, so there's many questions left in the chat. But I want to be respectful of everyone, all the attendees' time, as well as Sue's time, and thank everybody for being here, for your engagement in the webinar. We will be sharing a recording of this on our website. We'll send it out to the registered participants within the next week or so. And yeah, we appreciate you being here. We will be having another webinar next week. So look out for an announcement on that. That will be covering innovative ways to recruit and engage students with disabilities from high school to community college. So how to kind of make that pipeline more seamless, how to enroll students with disabilities, and some best practices related to that from Fresno City College. So thank you all. And we hope to see you there. Hope to see you again. I am going to, let's see, we have an evaluation survey that we would love for you to fill out. Beth, can you share the screen with the QR code for our evaluation survey? These evaluation surveys really are important for us to be able to, show our funders that these events are helpful. I just put it in the chat for everybody, the link as well. And Beth is sharing the screen, and we'll go to the QR code here. So please it'll take less than 5 minutes to fill out the survey. You can scan the QR code with your phone or click the link in the chat. And we hope to see you at a future event. And thank you so much again, Sue. Definitely very helpful information.
Thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity of being here today and sharing this information with you.
Thank you. Getting lots of thanks in the chat as well for you from the participants. We will be sending out an announcement regarding the next week's webinar to all of the participants who selected that they would like to hear about announcements in the registration for this webinar. But it will also be on our social media, the UCLA Tarjan Center social media, for those who are asking about next week's webinar. Thank you.